The sound of heavy chains dragging against asphalt jarred me out of sleep at 7 in the morning. Not the kind of alarm you want on a Saturday or ever, honestly. I stumbled over to the window, still trying to rub the grit from my eyes, and there it was, a massive tow truck creeping up my driveway. My stomach dropped. 3 years' worth of weekends spent restoring my '92 Honda NSX, and in a blink it was about to be snatched away like some abandoned hunk of metal. But what really set my blood boiling wasn't the tow truck itself. Nope, it was Linda, middle-aged, tracksuit, pristine, phone up and recording, living out her personal episode of Neighborhood Watch the Power Trip edition. She was bouncing on her toes, practically gleeful, talking loud enough for the whole block to hear about finally getting the trash out of our neighborhood. My shoes were somewhere I didn't care. I yanked on yesterday's jeans and sprinted out the door, bare feet slapping the cold concrete. The tow driver, a burly guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, paused as I ran up. I tried to keep my voice steady. "That's my car. Can I see the paperwork?" He handed me a clipboard, not meeting my eyes. Meanwhile, Linda was narrating, turning her phone to catch my face. "I've been trying to get that eyesore moved for months," she told another neighbor, all but crowing. This is what happens when people don't respect community standards. I stopped reading and locked eyes with the driver. "You really want to do this?" I asked. "The car's registered, insured, everything's legal. It's in my driveway." He looked over his shoulder at Linda, who swanned over like she owned the street. "Don't listen to him," she said, waving me off. "I've lived here 20 years. I know how things work around here. You're probably just house-sitting or renting, you wouldn't get it." All the while, she kept her phone pointed at me like a weapon, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "The car stays," I told the driver, as flat and firm as I could manage. "You don't have any grounds for this tow." That got me a laugh, one of those high-pitched bless-your-heart laughs. "Honey, I called this in as an abandoned vehicle. It hasn't moved in weeks, clearly not working." "Not abandoned and definitely working?" I shot back. "I drive it every weekend." She just waved that off. "I have a standing arrangement with the tow company. They know I'm the one keeping the street respectable. You don't really fit the vibe we're after." The driver shifted from foot to foot, clearly wishing he'd called in sick. But Linda had already slipped him something, probably a tip for helping the community. He sighed, apologetic. "I gotta do my job. Call came in, legit, got the documentation here. Report says the car was abandoned." Linda just smirked. "Consider the tow a stupid tax. Maybe next time you'll park your junk somewhere people don't have to look at it." Arguing felt pointless. The hooks were already on. I could see my car's wheels leaving the ground, and all I could do was stand there and watch. I pulled out my phone and started recording, trying to catch every word. "So just to clarify, you're saying you had my legally parked car towed because you don't like how it looks?" She hesitated, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. "I'm maintaining standards. That's what real homeowners do. We protect our property values." "And you believe you have the authority to make that call?" I asked. 20 years here gives me all the authority I need." I watched the tow truck vanish down the street, Linda standing tall on the curb, basking in her little power trip. Not for long. 3 hours later, I was at the impound lot with $400 in cash. The attendant was surprised. "Most people take days to come up with the fee," he said, counting the bills. I just shook my head. Most people don't have neighbors like mine. Back home, Linda's house was the center of attention, catering trucks, delivery vans, people setting up tables for her big garden party. I remembered her bragging about it yesterday. Mid-afternoon, I decided to see what kind of community event justified towing someone's car. Her backyard looked like something out of a magazine, flowers everywhere, folks sipping wine and pretending not to be judging each other. I strolled by casual, just close enough to catch her eye. She spotted me in seconds, storming over. "This event's for homeowners only. You don't belong here." I pointed at the sidewalk, "Just out for a walk, public space and all." Her eyes narrowed. "Well, you're not coming onto my property." I pulled out my phone and hit record. Guests started glancing over, sensing drama. "So after having my car towed yesterday, you're telling me today I don't belong here?" Her cheeks went pink, but she stuck to her script. "I did what I had to do. That car was an eyesore. People need to learn there are consequences for not fitting in. That tow fee," she added, "is basically a stupid tax for people who don't get how things work here." "Perfect," I said, pocketing my phone. "Thanks for making that clear." She smiled, thinking she'd just put me in my place. Little did she know that admission was going to cost her a lot more than $400. That night I sat down and drafted a formal complaint, quoted every bylaw about harassment and fraudulent reporting, pasted in the transcript of our conversation, attached the videos. Monday I sent it off to the HOA. Tuesday I got word there'd be an emergency board meeting Thursday. Community Center Thursday night. Linda was already there, all smiles, chatting with her loyalists. Then the board members filed in, treasurer, secretary, a few others' faces, serious voices low. 7 p.m. sharp. I stood up, walked to the front, and took the center seat. The room went dead silent. Linda's mouth literally dropped open. "Wait," she spluttered. "You're not on the board." "Actually, I am," I said, laying out the paperwork. "I'm the newly elected president and head of the architectural review. Elected 6 months ago after the last president moved out." She went pale. "I never got any notice about an election." The secretary chimed in. "All residents were notified through email and the portal. Elections followed the bylaws." Linda just shook her head. "I don't use computers." "Digital notice is official now," I replied. "But that's not the point." I laid out the case, tow company report, photos, transcripts. "We're here to address a formal complaint, false reporting, and harassment leading to unauthorized towing of a resident's car from private property." The treasurer scanned the evidence. "Says here the complainant admits the tow was for personal reasons." Linda tried to save face. "That car's been there for weeks. I was protecting the neighborhood." I slid a photo across the table. A 1992 Honda NSX, valuable, registered, insured, parked legally. And nowhere in the guidelines does it say anything about the age or make of cars in private driveways. The secretary took furious notes as Linda kept digging. "Well, maybe it should be regulated. I know what's best for our community." "Your personal preferences don't override procedure," I said. "And they don't give you the right to file false reports." I pulled out one more document. "By our bylaws, harassment and fraudulent reporting mean immediate removal from volunteer positions and potential fines. You cost me $400 and a ton of time. The total reimbursement demand is $650. Linda looked like she might pass out. "This is ridiculous. I was just maintaining standards." "We're not penalizing you for standards," I replied. "We're holding you responsible for lying and abusing the process." The secretary looked up. "The video's clear. The tow wasn't about rules. It was punishment for not fitting in." A low murmur went around the room. Turns out more than a few neighbors had stories about Linda's enforcement. I could see the realization dawning. Her days of intimidation were numbered. Given the evidence, I recommended immediate removal from her committee post plus full reimbursement. "You can't do that," she protested, voice barely above a whisper. "Serving the community means helping people, not harassing them," I said. "We need a welcoming committee, not a gatekeeper." The treasurer flipped through more records. "Actually, we've had a few complaints about aggressive tactics in the past." The vote was unanimous. "Motion carries," I said. "You'll get official notice soon." She packed up, hands shaking, face flushed with humiliation, and stormed out, tossing a last warning over her shoulder. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is," I said. "And if you try anything else, we'll talk legal action." Word spread fast. Over the next week, neighbors I barely knew started coming up thanking me, telling stories, mailboxes, flower colors, kids' bikes, fences. Linda paid the $650, probably just to avoid more headaches. Best part. My NSX sat in the driveway every weekend, looking even sweeter, drawing admiration instead of glares. About a month later, while I was washing the car, I caught Linda peeking from her window. She'd been quiet lately, grumbling about the decline of the neighborhood, but nobody was listening. She tried to drum up a petition, but folks were just enjoying the peace. The new welcoming committee actually helps newcomers, explains real rules, gives people a chance to settle in, none of that personal taste nonsense. 3 months after the board meeting, I heard Linda was selling her house. The irony wasn't lost on me. She tried to push others out, but ended up being the one who couldn't stand it anymore. One Saturday, while I was working on my car, an older neighbor stopped by to say thanks. He told me about the years of low-grade bullying, the complaints, the way Linda made everyone feel like she spoke for the whole board. "We didn't even know we could file a complaint," he admitted. "Now you do," I said, "and if anyone tries it again, let me know." Over the next few weeks, more stories surfaced. Families repainted houses, spent money fixing imaginary violations, lived in quiet fear of the woman with the clipboard. When she finally moved, you could feel the weight lift. 6 months after it all started, her house sold to a young family with kids. Folks excited to be here, relieved to find the rules were real and reasonable. They said they picked the place because people seemed genuinely welcoming, not like other neighborhoods they'd seen. Looking back, the whole thing taught me a lesson, not the kind you read in a manual, but something real. People like Linda rely on others not knowing their rights. They win when everyone else shrugs and thinks, guess that's just how it is. But the second someone pushes back with patience, with facts, with receipts, the whole thing crumbles. My NSX still shines out front. Every time I fire up the engine, I remember what it stands for now: a little bit of justice, a lot of patience, and proof that you don't need to raise your voice to win a fight. And somewhere I imagine Linda grinding her teeth at the sound, remembering how her 20-year power trip ended with the squeal of a tow truck and a line drawn in the concrete. Funny thing, folks who shout the loudest about community can be the ones who forget what that word actually means. So what's your take? Where do we draw the line between protecting a neighborhood and turning it into a private fiefdom? Who gets to decide what's right? If you've ever tangled with a rule enforcer like Linda, or had to stand up for yourself when the system seemed stacked against you, drop a comment below. Let's talk about justice and what it looks like when it finally shows up, sometimes on four wheels, sometimes in the shape of a simple no more.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video của mình.